Crestwood University had a lot of secrets, but there was one place everyone whispered about: Henderson Library. The building was old, built in the 1800s, and looked like something straight out of a horror movie. Dark stone walls, stained glass windows, creaky wooden doors, and a clock tower that hadn't worked in years. During the day, it was just a quiet, gloomy building with dusty books and flickering lights. But students didn't talk about the day. They talked about what happened at night, especially during finals week. It started as a rumor. One student told another, who told another, until it spread across campus. The story was always the same. On the night before finals, Henderson Library opens exactly at midnight. The front doors, usually locked, are suddenly unlocked. If you go inside and stay until morning, you'll walk out knowing everything on the exam, even things you didn't study. But no one ever saw the students who went in. They aced their finals, sure, but afterward they changed. Some dropped out without warning. Others stopped talking to friends. One guy was found in the woods behind the school, mumbling to himself and tearing pages out of textbook. Most people thought it was just a myth, but not Aaron. Aaron was a sophomore, smart but struggling. His chemistry final was in 2 days, and he was failing badly. If he didn't pass, he'd lose his scholarship and have to drop out. No matter how hard he studied, the formulas just didn't stick. He was desperate. That's when he heard the rumor. A girl in his dorm mentioned it casually. There's this library thing. It's probably fake, but they say if you go in at midnight before your exam, it helps you pass. Henderson Library. But don't stay too long. Creepy stuff happens. Aaron laughed it off at first, but later that night, as he stared at his textbooks with blurry eyes and a pounding headache, the idea started to make sense. What did he have to lose? The next night, he walked to Henderson Library. It was almost midnight. The campus was silent. A cold wind rustled the trees. Clouds covered the moon. The building loomed ahead of him, tall and dark, with its broken clock frozen at 12 o'clock. Aaron stood in front of the heavy doors. His breath was visible in the cold air. At exactly 12 a.m., the doors clicked. They slowly creaked open by themselves. He hesitated, but then stepped inside. The air was freezing. The lights were dim. Shelves stretched endlessly in every direction, packed with old books that smelled of dust and something else, something metallic. He took a few steps forward. The door shut behind him with a loud boom. He turned quickly, but there was no handle on the inside. No knob, just smooth cold wood. He was trapped. Okay, weird, he muttered, trying to stay calm. Suddenly, a lamp flickered on in the distance. A wooden desk sat in the center of the room. On the desk, a thick, leather-bound book titled, Everything You Need to Know. Aaron sat down and opened it. His eyes widened. Inside were notes, perfect handwritten notes, on every topic from his chemistry class. Detailed formulas, examples, even test questions he recognized from the study guide. It was like the book had been written just for him. That he started reading, flipping through the pages, soaking it in. For the first time in weeks, he actually understood the material. Hours passed in a blur. Then, somewhere deep in the library, a clock chimed once, 1 in. Aaron kept reading. Around 2 a.m., he began to notice whispers. Faint voices coming from the shelves behind him, but he turned. No one. Ellie shook it off. 3 a.m. The whispers grew louder. Then he saw something out of the corner of his eye. A tall figure, standing between the shelves. Just watching. He stood up. Hello. The figure stepped back and vanished into the shadows. Aaron felt cold sweat on his neck. He told himself it was stress, sleep deprivation, finals week panic. He sat back down and kept reading. Another hour passed. The lights dimmed slightly. The writing in the book began to change. Words stretched, letters twisted. He blinked. The formulas were still there, but now there were notes in the margins, scribbled in red ink. Don't stay past 4. It knows when you stop reading. Don't look behind you. Aaron's heart thudded in his chest. He slowly turned his head to look behind him. Nothing. He turned back to the book. The pages flipped on their own, landing on a photo. A black and white picture of a student hunched over the same desk, reading the same book. The photo looked recent. Suddenly, the clock chimed again. 4 a.m., and the lights went out. All of them. Total darkness. Aaron stood up fast, knocking the chair over. He couldn't see anything. His breathing grew faster. He took out his phone to use the flashlight, but the screen stayed black. Dead. He heard footsteps now. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. Then a voice whispered from right behind him. "You stayed too long." He spun around, but no one was there. He ran toward where he thought the entrance was, bumping into shelves and tables. The building seemed bigger now, the shelves stretching endlessly in every direction. He screamed for help, but the sound was swallowed by the dark. Books started falling from the shelves around him. Pages fluttered everywhere. Then, in front of him, the figure appeared again. This time he saw its face, or a lack of one, just smooth skin where the eyes and mouth should be. It reached toward him. Aaron turned and ran, his heart pounding like a drum. Somehow, he found the desk again. The book was still there, glowing faintly. He flipped to the last page. It read, "You passed, but not without a price." The doors burst open behind him, light spilling in. He ran toward it and didn't stop until he was outside. The sky was turning light. Birds chirped. It was morning. He stumbled back to his dorm, shaken, pale, and covered in dust and paper scraps. The next day, he took his exam. Every question, every formula, every answer, it all came easily to him. He passed. Aced it, in fact. But something was wrong. He couldn't sleep anymore. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the figure. He heard the whispers. He felt the presence behind him. He tried telling someone. They didn't believe him. He stopped going to class. Stopped talking. He became one of the changed students. If you passed him on campus, he'd be mumbling to himself. Sometimes he'd stop in front of Henderson Library and just stare. Other students noticed. Another desperate student heard the story and tried it. Then another, and another. Each one aced their exam. Each one fell apart afterward. The library still opens every finals week. Always at midnight. Always only to those who are desperate enough to try anything. Most never talk about what they saw inside, but some whisper the rules. Go in at midnight. Don't stop reading. Don't look behind you. And whatever you do, get out before 4 a.m. because the library gives you what you want, but it always takes something in return. When Emily got her acceptance letter to Crestwood University, everything felt perfect. She had a scholarship, a clean break from her quiet hometown, and a dorm room waiting just for her. It was a fresh start, the kind she had always dreamed of. The campus was beautiful, with red brick buildings, tall trees, and wide sidewalks. She arrived a week early, ahead of the usual freshman move-in rush, hoping to settle in quietly. Her dorm building, called Dorm 6B, stood on the far edge of campus. Covered in ivy, with old wooden stairs and dim yellow lighting, it had a quiet charm to it. But it also felt like it was hiding something. Her assigned room was 316. As she opened the door and stepped inside, she was met with a rush of cold air. The room was small, with 2 beds, 2 desks, and a window that looked out into the woods behind the campus. On the door were 2 names, Emily Watson and Leah Roth. "So I have a roommate," Emily said to herself with a smile. That first night, she unpacked her clothes, set up her desk, and made her bed. The other side of the room, Leah's side, was completely untouched. Empty bed, bare desk, nothing in the closet. Emily figured Leah would arrive later that week. But when she woke up in the middle of the night, something felt off. She heard whispers, faint, broken whispers coming from the other side of the room. Her eyes snapped open, heart pounding. She turned toward the empty bed. It was still empty. The whispers stopped when she turned on the lamp. She checked under the bed. Nothing. In the closet. Nothing. "Maybe I'm just anxious," she whispered, trying to calm herself. But the next morning, something strange had changed. Her clothes, neatly hung in the closet the night before, were now shuffled around. One of her notebooks was lying open on the other desk, Leah's desk. She didn't remember moving it. That night, the same thing happened again. Emily woke up at exactly 3:12 a.m. The room was dark and silent, except for the sound of someone breathing. Not her own, someone else's. It was slow, raspy, and close. She turned on the light. The other bed was still empty. The room was still locked. She tried to brush it off as sleepwalking. Maybe she was just stressed. But then came the third night. She was lying in bed, facing the wall, when she saw something move out of the corner of her eye. She turned slowly. There was a shadow sitting on the other bed, just sitting, motionless, like it had been watching her sleep. And then it vanished. Emily sat up and turned on every light in the room. Her heart raced as she tried to convince herself she was just dreaming, that none of this was real. She spoke to her RA, Brianna, the next morning. Hey, do you know when my roommate's coming? Brianna frowned. Leah Roth? Huh, she's on the list, but as far as I know, she hasn't moved in yet. Maybe she's running late. You're the only one on that floor so far. Emily nodded slowly. Right. That night, she left a notebook on her bed, completely blank. Just to see, when she woke up the next morning, the notebook was no longer blank. Someone had written in it. A single sentence in jagged, broken handwriting. Why did you let them forget me? Emily froze. Her chest tightened. Her eyes scanned the room. No one else could have been in there. The door had been locked. The windows were shut. She hadn't left the room. She needed answers. She went back to the housing office and asked again about her roommate. Leah Roth? The receptionist tapped the keyboard. She was assigned to your room, but it looks like she never checked in. No era iba, no widroel. That's strange. Back in her dorm, Emily began to feel like someone was always behind her, watching, breathing, waiting. She started asking around about Leah. At first, no one remembered her, but then Brianna pulled her aside. I probably shouldn't say this, Brianna whispered, but 3 years ago, there was a girl named Leah Roth. She lived in that same room, your room. Emily's stomach dropped. She was quiet, kept to herself. One day, she just vanished, left everything behind, her backpack, her laptop, even her phone. Police came, but nothing ever came of it. The school kind of swept it under the rug. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. The room felt heavier, colder. The air pressed down on her chest like something invisible was sitting on her. Then she heard the closet creak. She turned toward it. The door was open, just a crack. She slowly stood up and walked to it. She pulled it open all the way. It looked normal at first, until she noticed a square outline on the floor. A hatch. She opened it, revealing a small, dark crawl space underneath. She reached down and pulled something out, a torn, dusty photograph. 2 girls. One was labeled Leah. The other girl's face was violently scratched out. Suddenly, behind her, a soft giggle echoed in the room. She turned fast. No one was there. Emily was done. She started packing. She couldn't take it anymore. But when she tried to leave, the door wouldn't open. She twisted the knob, pounded on it, screamed. Nothing. She turned back toward the room and froze. On the mirror, smeared in dark red, were the words, Leah Roth, Leah Roth, Leah Roth, over and over. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A voicemail, but it said it was from her own number. She hesitated, then hit play. A girl's voice, low and angry, whispered, "You're not leaving. You took my room. You took my life. Now I'm taking yours." The message ended with a scream that made Emily drop the phone. After that night, things got worse. Emily stopped eating. She spoke to no one. She sat for hours staring into the corner of the room, whispering to herself. Sometimes, she would write the name Leah over and over in her journal. Sometimes she would wake up standing in the hallway, unsure how she got there. And sometimes her reflection didn't look like her anymore. One night, Brianna found Emily sitting on the dorm floor, rocking back and forth. Her voice was soft and distant. "It's my room now. She's gone. I'm Leah. I'm Leah." But Brianna swore the voice coming out of Emily's mouth didn't sound like Emily at all. The eyes weren't right either. They were cold, hollow, like someone else was looking through them. Emily was pulled from school and admitted to a mental facility. She never came back to Crestwood. Dorm 6B was quietly shut down for repairs. No one talks about Leah Roth, but those who lived on the 3rd floor of Dorm 6B still remember. They say that if you walk past room 316 late at night, you can hear 2 girls arguing, one crying, one laughing, and if you listen carefully, you'll hear a voice whisper, "Why did you let them forget me?" Because some roommates never really leave. Crestwood University was known for its peaceful campus, great professors, and long history. But hidden deep under the surface, beneath the old buildings and lecture halls, there were stories that most students never heard. Stories passed down through whispers, half-jokes, and old rumors. One of those stories was about West Hall. It was the oldest building on campus. Built in the early 1900s, it had thick stone walls, arched doorways, and peeling paint that made it look more like an abandoned hospital than a classroom building. Students hated having classes there. The floors creaked. The halls were always cold, and the lights flickered like they were always about to go out. No one wanted to be assigned to West Hall. But that's where Chris, Derek, and Maya had their late-night film study class every Thursday. The class ended at 10:30 p.m. when the building was nearly empty and silent. One night, after class, Chris leaned against a hallway wall and knocked on it jokingly. Instead of the usual solid thud, he heard something strange, a hollow echo, like there was space behind the wall. "Did you hear that?" he asked. Derek knocked again. Same hollow sound. Maya raised an eyebrow. "That's weird. Maybe there's a room back there." Chris squatted and ran his fingers along the baseboard. "There's something here." That's when they saw it, a small metal door, half hidden behind a filing cabinet. It was locked but old, rusted. Chris pulled out a hairpin from Maya's bag, and after some fiddling, the lock popped open. The door creaked open with a loud blow. Behind it was a narrow, dark staircase leading down. The air that came up was cold and smelled like mildew and something sour. "Should we go down?" Chris asked, holding his phone flashlight. "No way," Maya said. "It could be dangerous." But Derek was already stepping inside. "We'll just look." 5 minutes. Curiosity got the better of them all. They descended the steps slowly. The air got colder with every step. At the bottom, they reached a long, low-ceiling tunnel made of old bricks. Pipes lined the walls. The floor was damp. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. There were no signs, no lights, just one long hallway stretching into darkness. They kept walking, using their phones as flashlights. The tunnel twisted and turned. They found strange rooms along the way, one with rusty bed frames, another filled with broken furniture. One door had scratch marks on it, deep grooves in the wood. Maya stopped. Why would this be under West Hall? Chris looked around. It almost looks like an old hospital. There were thick chains on some of the doors, peeling wallpaper, broken tiles. Everything reeked of old bleach and decay. Derek laughed nervously. What if this used to be an asylum or something? That's when they found the journal. It was on the floor in front of a locked door. Its pages were stained and torn, but some writing was still readable. "They don't let us leave. The voices won't stop. Room 9 is the worst. If you find this, turn back before it finds you." Maya took a step back. "We shouldn't be here." But Chris had already found a way to open the door. The hinges groaned as it swung open. Inside was a small room, bare, with only a metal chair and a broken mirror on the wall. The mirror was cracked, but it reflected more than just the room. In it, they saw another person standing behind them. But when they turned around, no one was there. The reflection still showed the figure. A tall, pale person with sunken eyes and a twisted smile. Suddenly, Derek dropped the journal. His nose started bleeding. He shook his head, confused and dizzy. "We need to leave. Now," Maya said, grabbing his arm. But as they turned to go back, they realized something terrifying. The hallway they came from was no longer there. The tunnel had changed. It now stretched endlessly in the other direction. Chris spun in a circle. What the hell? We didn't come this far down. Maya checked her phone. No signal. No GPS. The flashlight flickered. A low groan echoed from deeper in the tunnel. Footsteps. Not theirs. Wet, slow footsteps slapping against the floor. Then breathing loud. Raspy. Right behind them. They ran, turning corners, pushing through broken doors, trying every hallway they could find. But the place kept changing. Some halls looped back. Others led to dead ends. One door they opened showed the same room they had just left. It was like the tunnel was alive. Then Chris disappeared. 1 second, he was right behind them, then gone. No scream, no sound, just gone. Maya and Derek called his name over and over, their voices echoing through the brick walls. They found his phone on the floor, still recording. The screen showed him looking scared, saying, "It's watching me," before the video cut out in static. They kept moving. The tunnel started whispering. Not just noise, words. Their names, their secrets. Things they never told anyone. Maya froze. How does it know that? Then the lights went out. Their phone flashlights shut off at the same time. They were in total darkness. Derek grabbed her hand. They stood still, barely breathing. Then something touched Maya's shoulder. Cold. Bony. She screamed and ran. Derek followed. They burst into a room with no door, just walls. One chair in the center. A handprint smeared in red on the wall. There was no way out. Until they saw another mirror. This one was tall. Clean. Too clean. In the reflection, they saw themselves, but they weren't moving. The reflection showed them sitting in the chairs. Eyes closed. Mouths sewn shut. Behind them stood the figure. Long fingers. Pale face. No eyes. It grinned in the mirror. Then the glass cracked. Maya reached out. Her hand passed through. A soft, cold wind pulled them both forward. They woke up on the floor of West Hall. Morning sunlight was coming through the hallway windows. Everything looked normal. Quiet. Peaceful. But Chris was gone. One believed their story. They told campus security. A search was done. No tunnel was found. The door behind the cabinet? Gone. The filing cabinet was bolted to the wall. The space behind it was just brick. But Maya and Derek knew what they saw, what they lived through. Now, late at night, Derek says he hears scratching behind his dorm wall. Maya sees things in mirrors that shouldn't be there. And sometimes, when they pass West Hall, they hear it. Footsteps. Wet. Slow. Following them from underground. They never speak of that night out loud anymore. Because the tunnel isn't gone. It's just waiting for the next student to open the door. There are some buildings on college campuses that feel a little off. Maybe it's the way they look, or the silence around them, or how people seem to avoid talking about them. At Crestwood University, that building was Dorm 7C. It was old, brick, and tucked away at the edge of campus. It didn't show up on maps anymore. Most students didn't even realize it was there. Just a forgotten building behind a row of newer dorms. Overgrown bushes hid the front. The windows were always dark. It looked empty, but it wasn't. Megan and her friends, Jasmine, Theo, and Kyle, were all film majors working on a final project. They needed something spooky, something real. Megan suggested filming a short horror story using 7C as the setting. How thou win? That place gives me the creeps. That's exactly why we should use it, Megan replied. Authenticity. They grabbed their gear one night and headed over. The path to Dorm 7C was nearly invisible. They had to cut through the woods and follow a rusted fence line. The dorm stood there like it had been forgotten by time. Red bricks covered in vines, broken windows, doors that looked sealed shut. Kyle tried the front door. Locked. But Jasmine found a side door near the back that was slightly open, the frame warped and weak. The air inside was thick and stale, like no one had entered in years. Dust floated through their flashlight beams. The main hallway stretched forward into darkness, with faded room numbers on each door. It was exactly what they needed for their film. They explored floor by floor, finding old beds, dusty desks, abandoned notebooks. Everything looked like the students had left in a hurry, but there were no signs of vandalism, no graffiti. It was too clean for a building that had been abandoned so long. Weird, Theo said. There's power. Megan flipped a light switch. A single bulb flickered on, buzzing softly. They picked a few rooms and set up their cameras. They decided to film a short scene where a student investigates a haunting. Megan acted. Theo directed. Kyle ran the camera. Jasmine handled the boom mic. Everything was going well until the whispers started. At first, they thought it was part of the audio playback. Then they heard it in real time. Faint, just behind them. Words they couldn't make out. A low voice, almost like breathing. They stopped recording. Theo scanned the hallway. Hello. No answer. They shrugged it off. Maybe it was the wind through the broken windows. They kept filming. Then the doors started closing on their own. Not slamming, just slowly, softly closing one by one down the hallway. Tap, tap, tap. Theo stared down the hall. That's not wind. They checked the front door. It was locked. So was the side door. Megan's phone had no signal. None of them did. Kyle pulled out his GPS app. It couldn't find their location. It says we're not on campus, he muttered. They decided to pack up and leave. But when they turned to exit, the building had changed. The hallway behind them was different. Longer. The wallpaper now had strange symbols drawn in red. None of them remembered seeing that. They ran for the staircase, but when they opened the stairwell door, it led to another hallway. Same wallpaper, same flickering lights, same locked doors. This doesn't make sense, Jasmine said. We came in through one floor. How are there more now? They began to panic. They split up against every horror rule, but it wasn't planned. They were just trying to find a way out. Megan found herself in a room with a giant mirror. It showed her reflection, but the room behind her looked different, newer. The walls were painted, the light was brighter, and there was a girl standing behind her. She spun around. No one, but the girl in the mirror didn't disappear. She smiled. Then the mirror cracked. Meanwhile, Theo was in a room full of personal items, old clothes, notebooks, photos, all perfectly arranged like someone still lived there. He picked up a photo. It was a group of students standing outside dorm 7C. The image was old. The clothes were outdated, but one face looked familiar. It was him. He dropped the photo. On the back, someone had written, "We never left." Jasmine screamed from somewhere down the hall. Kyle found her in a room filled with drawings. Hundreds of them, taped to the walls and floor. All showed the same figure. A dorm with black smoke pouring from the windows. A shadowy figure stood at every door. In the corner of the room, someone had written in large, smeared letters. They locked US in. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Not theirs. Slow, dragging footsteps. One of the cameras turned itself on and began recording. The screen flickered, showing the group from behind, even though they were standing in front of it. The camera feed glitched. The time code reversed. Megan shouted, "We need to go now." They ran back through the hallways, trying every door. Then, finally, they found a staircase leading to the roof. The door opened. The air outside was freezing. The city lights glowed in the distance. But the campus below looked wrong. There were no students, no buildings, just fields and trees. Like the campus had never been built. What year is it? How we-spa? They went back downstairs in panic, tried to escape through any window or door. Everything led them back into the same hallway. They were trapped. Jasmine started crying. Then Megan disappeared. They turned a corner, and she was just gone. Her camera lay on the floor, the screen flashing. Error. Time not found. Kyle whispered. What if this isn't a dorm anymore? What with the memory? As they moved, the building began changing faster. Rooms flickered between old and new. Lights blinked between color temperatures. They saw glimpses of students frozen in place, mid-step, mid-laugh, mid-scream. Like echoes, like the dorm was replaying time over and over. Then they heard a voice that it wasn't human. It came from the walls. Deep, low, like stone grinding against stone. You opened the door. You were never supposed to open it. Theo shouted, "What do you want?" The voice whispered, "To be remembered." They found a room at the very end of the hallway with a door slightly ajar. Light poured out. Inside was a classroom with rows of desks, as if waiting for students to return. A blackboard read, "Class of 1983. Everyone failed." And below that, "Now we teach the living." They fled that room. Eventually, they reached the stairwell again, except this time, it led straight outside. It was morning. Birds chirped. The sun rose over the real campus. They stumbled out, dazed, dirty, and shaken. The building behind them was gone. Not locked, not boarded up, just not there. Only an empty lot with trees and dirt. A few students walked by. Megan, Jasmine, Theo, and Kyle stared in shock. Kyle grabbed a passing student. "What happened to dorm 7C?" The student looked confused. "What's 7C? There's never been a 7C. Campus records showed no dorm 7C. No building ever existed in that spot. No one remembered it. The school had no memory of it ever being there. But the footage on their camera told a different story. Megan reappeared on the recording, her face pale, eyes empty. Behind her stood dozens of frozen students, whispering. The last frame of the footage was a black screen with red text. We remember, and we're not done. Now, sometimes late at night, students near that part of campus hear footsteps, or laughter, or the sound of camera rolling. And if you're unlucky enough to go looking for a dorm that shouldn't exist, you might just find it. But you won't come back the same, because dorm 7C doesn't vanish. It waits.